Hey, it's Mazzy, and welcome back. Today I want to showcase the new Ultimate collection of the John Lennon Mind Games, the 1973 album. This is the new set coming out in July, curated by Sean Ono Lennon, and it contains a new Ultimate remix of the album, including various elemental discs, and I'll get into that, what that's about. In a little bit, and an amazing book, a wonderful book. I want to get in details. Before I get into this, I want to thank the people in the UK representing John, Yoko, and Sean for sending me this. It was a lovely little note here that several I see YouTubers, reviewers got talking about the Ultimate Collection, and Sean's overview of his intention for this, thinking of mind games as a game. And there are some hidden things in here that are interesting if you can find them and how you can find them and if your player plays them. And I'll get into that as we take the deep dive. Now remember, these are one man's opinion. Please, at the end of this, there is a link to an earlier video I did about 2 months ago when this disc was announced, when this reissue was announced. And it was my take on the original 1973 album of Mind Games. And my experience getting these during my first record store job. And the cliff notes here is, I like this record a lot, but I always had major issues with the mix or the mastering on this. I just didn't like it. There was something off from my point of view. And this is the first album that John produced all on its own, with some great engineers, great people around her. And the wonderful thing about this, another, aside from great songs on here, are the wonderful musicians, some of the finest New York studio musicians of the day, along with West Coaster Jim Keltner on drums, who had worked with John before, and Sneaky Pete Clydo working on the pedal steel. I'll get into that a little bit. Now, the cliff notes before I get into the deep dive is, I am absolutely enthralled by the Ultimate Mix. I think Sean and company did a fantastic job. I love John's vocals lifted above. Now, those of you who are against remixes, and I go hot and cold with these, to be honest with you. Most people I know that I'm kind of hot and cold with all the Giles Martin remixes for the Beatle albums, the proper albums. Yes, we have the originals to fall back on. I don't always like that they're not notated in some kind of cover change on that, but I don't think they're as consistent as I would like them to be. But we have the originals there, so that's it. And I know a lot of artists these days are doing remix versions, and some may say, what's the point? Now, a remix, when done right, on certain records can be absolutely incredible. I will cite last year's remix of the Replacements album, Tim. That replaced the original mix, and it bested it by far. That's just one example. I think this is the same. And as we know, John Lennon always had a little bit of a insecurity thing about his vocals. That's why a lot of times he'd do the 80 auto double tracking on early Beatles songs. That's a lot of times why he liked his voice sort of disguised and altered in some way. It wasn't always an absolute. Of course, when he was singing with Paul, that was not done, but he had that great harmony thing with Paul or George or even Ringo at that point. But the vocals are really brought up on this, and I'll get into that as we go through the songs, and they're crystal clear. This is the best sounding version. Again, I didn't like that original 73 version. 2002, there was a remix on CD only initially. I think there was a mobile fidelity, I was told, that I haven't heard on vinyl. So I'm looking forward to the vinyl. There's going to be a limited, I don't know about limited edition, but limited in scope, a 2 LP set. I assume it has the proper, this deluxe definitive or remix, and it has outtakes on disc 2. And I will order that, or I'll pick it up at my local. And I'm looking forward to that because I am a vinyl guy. But as you can see here behind me, there are a lot of compact discs, and I'm not averse to compact discs at all. I will say these sound great. And One thing that was asked of me in some of the forums right off, they thought some of the box set that Sean worked on, the collection that came out, Give Me Some Truth, some of the tracks were heavy bass and bloated. I didn't think that except for a few tracks, and I did do a review on that, my take on that back then. But everything is subject to our taste, our ears, our rigs, and our rooms. And I thought this set is more balanced than the others, especially that Give Me Some Truth set. I friggin' love his vocals on this. And John's vocals literally made me verklempt. That's a Yiddish word. I was touched. I was almost on the verge of an emotional thing. Listening to John's voice on this. These are great songs. And I think a lot of the songs got lost because of the muddiness, or because of, maybe muddy is not the word, but there were problems I saw with the mix. And especially when you hear it now with all these wonderful musicians. But I need to go back a little bit before we jump into this. But earlier that year in 1973, this record by Yoko Ono. This is Feeling the Space. Yoko Ono, the Plastic Ono Band, something different. This is, I think, one of her best albums. And this is the album that has almost all the musicians that would eventually play on this Mind Games album. And because of Yoko, she brought these amongst the greatest studio musicians that are playing in New York. And I'll get into those too. I love this record. I am personally a Yoko Ono fan, musically, artistically. Looking forward later this summer to check out her show at the Tate Modern. Ends in early September. A little bit of an offshoot here, but I just like this whole mix of things. And I think there is a thing about worlds colliding. This came out in 1973. Just prior to this, a year earlier, 1972, was Sometime in New York City. Now, conspicuously in its absence, Sean and company so far have skipped doing that one. That's a problematic album. I actually enjoy the record. I love the all-in political side of that record, the newspaper clippings on the cover art, and the songs of John and Yoko. I love most of those songs. I think Elephant's Memory Band is a mess. I never liked them. The horns, the screeching horns, they're sloppy. John apparently liked that at the time, was considering a tour, but all the politics came in with his possible deportation around that time, and that was scrapped. A year later, he works on this with some amazing studio musicians. So right off the bat, this already has better DNA from my point of view. I'm all into punk and sloppiness and looseness and funkiness, but there's something about the Elephant's Memory Band that just doesn't do it for me. I still would like to see what Sean and company can do for that at some point. And even though it might not be something that is as popular or commercial, even some sort of limited or direct or subscription, see who's in for it and who would order it. I think that would be kind of cool. So this is the 10-inch box set. What's great, again, which I've said on other videos, the Lennon estate, which is basically Sean and Yoko, but now really Sean primarily working on this, has the just the imagination and the artistic synchronization to have all these beautiful square inch sets that match. We've had Plastic Ono Band and Imagine, and they're a wonderful set, including a great book on that. So you have these set that magically line up. Not even magically, they line up because they're the same size. I don't know what the Beatle people were thinking at Apple to make every Beatle reissue a different size format. I mean, come on, my head's exploding just seeing those on the shelf before. The McCartney archive sets are okay. They're not exactly even, but they're closer. George, who knows what Danny's doing? I wish he would do more of consistency of releases, and maybe now since they switched to another parent company, that'll happen. But this is really cool. Now, let's go into it here. I'm gonna do some cutaways, by the way, as we get into this set. What we have here is the CDs. We have 6 CDs here that are in a folio. We have 2 Blu-rays. I'll get into details of the music later. We have a replica of the original promo poster. Now, when I showed that video, I still have a couple copies of the poster that in store, you put it on your walls and in the windows of retailers. And it was essentially this. This is a 10-inch replica. My guess is there's going to be a 12-inch version, which is exactly the size of the original in the LP. Not sure yet, I haven't seen that. But this is kind of just a nice little extra. This was the promo that Capitol in America put out, possibly in the UK, I don't know. I didn't see that. Also, you get a couple of postcards, John Lennon Mind Games postcards. And then lastly, you have the Citizen of Utopia ID card. So we're all members of this fictional country, no borders, no government, no anything. It's just the people. And it's a very conceptual concept. Now, John and Yoko were going through a heavy political time here. Obviously, I said Summertime New York was an extremely political album. This is that transition album that crosses from politics to more intimate songs again. You know, John would kind of really jump hole in on politics in 1972 during that anti-war period, the Richard Nixon years, the Democratic Convention hooking up with Jerry Rubin and all these other people, and considered, you know, going and protest down to Miami, and held back mainly because of the deportation things that were happening in the FBI following John and Yoko. This is the book. What I love about this is how generous Sean and company are about the musicians. This book is full of self-described biographies of every single musician on here. And that's a big part of this book. You have Dave Spinoza, someone who is just unbelievable, a good guitar player on this, who played on both Yoko and this album. You have, obviously, Ken Asher on piano, organ, and mellotron. You got Gordon Edwards, that wonderful kind of funky bass player. The bass on this is incredible too, but it's not over-bloated. Some have asked me, is it brick wall? Is it over-bloated? Not at all. It's well-balanced sonically, musically. All of them have worked together on other records and in the New York commercial scene and studio scene, except for Jim Keltner at that point. You got Michael Brecker on sax. Now, I will say one thing. Most of the horns are brought way down or almost invisible now. They're almost eliminated. There's not a lot of horns on this album compared to later records like Walls and Bridges and even Rock and Roll. And I think that is one of the best things that Sean and company decided here, because the way they recorded those horns, I'm just not a fan. Now, I don't know if they're engineered that way or what's on the tape, but I think this makes it for a better album. There's more clarity throughout the entire album, but it's not to the point of taking away from what the great songs are here. And the songs here come out better than ever. These are great songs. I keep hearing and reading things about people saying, oh, it's one of his weakest records. His songwriting isn't so good. On the contraire, these are songs that got buried, in my opinion, in 1973. You got Sneaky Pete Kleinow, the great pedal steel guitar player. Reading about him, talking how he's not a fan of Nashville. He's not really an all-in country guy, which is rare when you think of the steel pedal guitar, you think of country music. And of course, he was in the Flying Burrito Brothers and worked on a lot of great kind of crossover albums like that. But he plays the steel on here, and like nobody else ever plays. It's a mix of guitar and effects and the way he uses his pedals. I will say one thing, that in my mind, even though I knew there was pedal steel on the original Mind Games, it wasn't so apparent. And it's more apparent now, not that it's brought up, but hearing these elemental mixes I'll get into in a minute, it just makes the beauty of this record even more beautiful from my point of view. And that steel is that little extra something that John and Yoko brought in a little special for this record. I mean, you could do all these songs without Sneaky Pete, without the pedal, but it adds that little, it's like that little extra ingredient in a pasta dish. A little bit of chili flakes, a little bit of something, oregano or something that just adds to it that you don't even notice it's there until you go back and listen again. So I think that's amazing. You have these background vocalists of Christina Wilton, Angela Coakley, and Kathy Mall, this kind of soulful stuff that, again, I always heard them in the original mix, but hearing them and hearing the Elements mixes, I just have a whole new appreciation for that. Now, when I'm talking about the various mixes, let me go through this on each disc. First, we got the Ultimate Mix, which is on Blu-ray 1 and CD 1. So you have a choice of the Blu-ray or the CD in this case. You have the whole album. All the mixes, the remixes on disc 1 are stunning. They're beautiful, they're well balanced, they're very, very dynamic. My only problem with this was Only People. And Only People, John goes through this riff, boogie baggy, yeah, right, rock on, whatever he's doing there, he's doing it way too much and too loud. It goes on, and it just takes away from the song. And I know that was in the mix. You hear a little bit on the original 1973 mix, but you hear it for the entire last, couple minutes. I didn't time it, but I just think it takes away from it. The Boogie Baby's fine, and then, okay, enough's enough, John. Okay, we get it. It's fine for an outtake. I like it later when you get the Evolution documentaries or the Element mixes or the raw studio mixes. Fine there. But on the Ultimate Mix, I would have lost all that shit, personally. I think that takes me out of the spirit of the song. Thinking back to 1973 when I first heard this record, I remember not loving the rockers. I am a rock fan. I liked his ballads on this record for the most part more. But now, in this remix, listening to Bring on the Lucy, Frida People, Only People, Meat City, the rockers here are killer. They work so much better now than they did because they're cleaner. And I don't need rock and roll to be so clean and so saccharine-like. This is a wonderful rock and take on this. I just love those tracks. I love the way the choices they made in mixing this and what instrument. You don't have anything above anyone else. It's pretty well balanced when it needs to be. Certain things come up when they need to be. I tell you, things that stand out musically on this record are Ken Asher's acoustic piano playing. It's beautiful on this record. Also on the beginning of Out the Blue, that acoustic guitar by Dave Spinoza is sublime. It's so wonderful. I always thought that was John. I don't know why, it seemed like a John thing, but it's acoustic guitar intro. And reading what Dave Spinoza says after he's listening to these remixes and these elemental mixes, he thinks, God, I couldn't even play that today. I'm not sure what I did. It seems so simple, but it's so difficult. And I love reading in the book of all the different musicians talking about the parts they did. And I love the things of Gordon Edwards and Jim Keltner being in the pocket and talking about the rhythm section, and all the other people really emphasizing how unique Jim Keltner is in the way he's playing on this, and even Sneaky Pete. Now, the next CD is the Elemental Mixes, and what that is this progress of the song from demo to work in progress levels, in a way like sketchbooks. I've said this many times. These kind of sets, they're not for everybody, but people like me who love to see the progression of an artist, when I go to the museum and I want to see the Picasso sketchbooks, or I want to see Da Vinci's journals to see how he got to where he got with his final creations. That's what these kind of things are about. I'm going to hark back to a bootleg I got many, many years ago on CD. I just want to throw this in because I don't remember getting anything like this before. It's possible I have. It's not too bad. And this is a bootleg. And what this is, it's every version of Strawberry Fields. It's something like an hour plus going from demos that John did as a folk song in Spain while he was working on How I Won the War, to more demos, to electric demos, to going to Abbey Road and working it out, to all the different versions, and ultimately to the final cut and mix that George Martin put together, editing several tracks and several speeds to it. And you know, this kind of thing will drive someone crazy listening to an hour plus of Strawberry Fields, every version, every take, from like in the desert, on the plains, demos in Spain, to the final studio creation of a magnificent piece of music. It's not that dramatic with the elemental mixes, but what Sean's done on all 3 volumes of so far that he's put out, you've heard that progress on several songs. There's something new in here called the elements mixes. I know it's a little confusing, so stay with me here, where you have maybe just the bass and the vocals. And there's one beautiful thing here where you just have the bass, I believe, and the pedal steel of Sneaky Pete doing You Are Here. It's almost like this beautiful Hawaiian sunset. And you can hear that on YouTube if you go to the John Lennon site. I know that was one of the first things they dropped. And it's just a wonderful, mesmerizing meditation. The element mixes are like meditation. You can play those at late at night or in the morning and just have them flow. You have the background vocalist on a couple of tracks here. It's just a really nice extra. These aren't meant to replace anything. These aren't meant to change anybody's mind. But what they talk about in the book is listen to these things, and then after again, go back and listen to the ultimate mixes, and you'll hear things having that sense memory from those unique, isolated tracks, like having stems and playing with it. It's really a beautiful thing. Again, I got goosebumps listening to John's vocals on here, and when he's talking to all the band members, it's remarkable. And reading the comments, what I came out from reading the book, the entire book I read on my first day while I was listening to this, is how, in a way, surprised or in awe some of these musicians are. Remember, these musicians are technically better musicians than John Lennon ever was as a guitar player, or a musician anyway, on piano. And them talking about John Lennon, the way he would change in the middle of a song, or do a really interesting time signature, a 6/8 time signature, and then change to something else, where he knew something in his head, how a harmony should be, either harmony vocally or a harmonic dynamic with various instruments, where he would hum something. I think David Spinoza is the one who also would score orchestration and do a string section. And there was one cut specifically that he hummed to David Spinoza to write out charts. It took him, I think he had 2 days to write out charts for a string section. And he knew from the way John heard it in his head. I mean, you're talking about musical genius of someone, and him and Paul, obviously, who are untrained. And what they did here, reading all these contemporary discussions with almost all the musicians on here, which is, to me, a wonderful part of the book, an amazing part of this book here. I'm in awe how generous Sean and his team were to include all this stuff from the various engineers, musicians, these conversations. You have a whole section here, whole double spread of Sneaky Pete talking about his history as a musician, his philosophy as a musician. Sometimes they get into a little bit of what they were doing on this album, how they related to John, how they heard John, the surprising things of working with John Lennon, Kenny Asher, piano and keyboards. It goes into the history of these people that no other artist would give the time of day with a box set or going back, and the ongoing interviews track by track. If all you need is the music, I know there's a double CD set that I believe has maybe outtakes as well as the remix. The remix is special. This is a special remix. There is one aspect of this collection that is going to be problematic for some people. Some heads will explode. And you have to go into it thinking of this is something extra. Remember, this was not advertised, but because of some of us getting these advanced copies and the rumor mill and the forums, heads are going to explode here when it comes to this. You know how over the last 20, 30 years, the concept of Easter eggs and secret and hidden tracks. Remember that silly thing back in the CD's heyday when a CD would end and then you'd have this blank space for 20 minutes and all of a sudden a track would appear on the same track. You couldn't fast forward to it without holding that fast forward button down. Well, there's some of that weirdness, spooky weirdness in here. And I think it is interesting, but maybe a little problematic. I'm using problematic twice there, 3 times there. There's a few things you have to get if you want to tackle that on this deluxe set. Now, if you want to experience the entire artistic experience, you need to get a torch. Now, not just any torch. You need to get a UV blacklight torch. In America, we call these flashlights, but whatever you need, you can get these probably for $10 on Amazon or wherever. You can get the small little light ones. What's nice about these, if once you're finished with this, you can probably use it if you have mice and rat droppings in your garage, or if you're like want to make sure there's no semen stains on the sheets or in the hotel room you go to. So bring it along on the road after you experience this. Here's why you need a torch. And I'm going to do some cutaways here so it's easier for you to see. But first, let me just start out with the clamshell, the box set, I guess. And you can see there. See the type there? Those are the hidden tracks. The hidden tracks. I'm the Greatest, Ultimate Mix. You Are Here, outtake. Mellotron Magic, weird slide guitar. That is essentially Sneaky Pete, and I guess Asher, is that right? I think it is Ken Asher on the Moog synthesizer, basically doing what George Harrison did on electronic sounds. So if you know electronic sounds, you know what that sounds like on there. You also have Rock and Roll People, Meat City single version, and I'm the Greatest Evolution documentary, and then Matchbox, That's All Right, Heartbreak Hotel. So far, that last one is the only one I have yet to discover how to play it. Now, before I get into those tracks, let me say this. I tried to play these on my CD player. Upstairs, I have an Oppo 205, a pretty high-end CD Blu-ray transport. I couldn't play them there. I came down to my den in here, down in my studio here. I couldn't play them there. Went back up, put on the Blu-ray. Success. I can play them on a Blu-ray. I could play them the on-screen on each section, on the Ultimate, the Elemental, the Evolution, the Raw. You go to the first track and you go one track earlier, which is kind of this invisible track. Heads are going to explode because not everyone is going to be able to access this right now. Apparently, the word has it that Sony players are really good to that, but my high-end Oppo failed me. But in the Blu-ray, I was able to hear that. I think at some point down the line, they'll probably put these out either through streaming or through downloads on sites later. I don't know if that's going to happen, but that would be nice. Now, some people think, why don't they just stick them on the end? Well, I didn't invent this. I didn't put this together. But I guess they expected this to be just like this extra thing that, like Easter eggs, like on video games and old CDs and things. But it is a bit of a shit show, and it is sort of this frustrating thing. On the second day of playing, I literally tried my hardest on the CD, ended up quitting, going to sleep. Next morning, I decided putting the Blu-ray on, and I figured it out. Let me get my trusty torch. Torch on. I'm the Greatest. I believe that is the same version that is on the Record Store Day issue. Always love that. Of course, that's the song that Ringo would record on his self-titled 1973 album. You Are Here, the outtake. Beautiful. I tell you, that's one of the best songs on the album. I like it. The long version that is on the EP, the Record Store Day EP, is also on here. Rock and Roll People Ultimate Mix. It's kind of a rock and roll jam, if you will. It's interesting, unnecessary. That's why it's a hidden extra. You know, maybe they didn't want to take up space. It's fun to hear. Hear John and band jamming is always a good thing. I don't think that's necessary. It's not one of the proper songs. Meat City, the single version, always good to have. I'm the Greatest, the Evolution documentary. That's nice because that is the period when you have George and Klaus and Ringo in the studio there. And there's some talk back. I wish it was longer, but I don't remember how long it is. You have, again, I said the Mellotron Magic. I'm trying to think, that's either 10 minutes or 20 minutes. It's either longer than it should be or shorter than it is or too short, and I don't remember which, okay? So there's that. Still haven't found Matchbox. That's all right. It didn't quite work for me based on the instructions that I was giving. But let me just say in closing, this is a beautiful journey. Give it the time. It took 5 days to make. Give yourself 5 days. Don't try to plow through it all. I plowed through it in 3 days, and I really need to take more time and to dive in. Even when I was doing things around the house this morning on the 4th day, I kind of had it on in the background, and the songs are just beautiful. More beautiful than I ever remember most of them being. I'm in awe of this, and I can just imagine the emotions that Sean especially had listening to these playback. Now, I know you hear this stuff over and over and over again. You're working on a project like this, and all the time and all the team effort putting this together, to me, is just nothing short of, I'm awestruck by it. Yes, I got it free, but this is something I would have bought either way, and getting something as a promo copy doesn't color my opinion on the packaging and the music. And I have been asked if I ordered the super duper crazy artistic big thing. And the answer I've given to everyone is, I don't remember. Anyway, thanks for watching. Mazzy loves you.